Tate slept over at Noah's house, curled beneath the covers with his arms wrapped around Noah. Within minutes, he had fallen into a deep, peaceful sleep. When Tate woke at 8 that morning, the bed was empty. It was always like that. Every time Tate spent the night, usually about twice a week, Noah was already gone by the time he opened his eyes. It was a habit Noah had kept since he was 18. Tate often wondered why. Was Noah simply an early bird who liked getting up before everyone else to go to the gym, work on projects, or enjoy the quiet of the morning, or was there another reason? Sometimes Tate couldn't help wondering if Noah just didn't want to stay in bed with him. Noah came back around noon to find Tate sitting at the kitchen table, waiting for him. When Noah saw him, he jumped slightly but didn't say anything. He walked over to the refrigerator, poured himself a glass of guava juice, and took a sip. "Why do you get up so early?" Tate asked. Noah looked over at the clock. "What time is it?" "Exactly noon," Tate replied. "Great," Noah said. "Now I'm going to go watch some television." Tate watched him walk into the living room. His question had gone unanswered. Noah flipped on the television, stopping on a sports channel. He grabbed a bag of plain potato chips from the pantry, the bland kind he normally never ate, and settled onto the couch, stretching out like a contented cat. Tate stood in the doorway, watching him. Since when did Noah watch sports? Slowly, Tate walked over and without a word switched off the television. "What are you doing?" Noah asked. They were about to score. "Turn it back on." "I asked you a question," Tate said. Noah looked up at him unimpressed. "What do you want?" he asked. "I'm in my own house, I'm eating chips, and I want to put my feet up for a while. I don't remember inviting you over to interrogate me. I really didn't invite you over at all." The room fell silent as Tate continued standing between Noah and the television. Tate couldn't stop staring at the bag. Of all the strange things Noah had done that morning, somehow that bothered him the most. The chips. Plain. Noah hated plain chips. He had complained about them since they were teenagers, saying they tasted like salted cardboard. If those were the only chips in the house, Noah simply wouldn't eat chips. Tate had watched him walk away from bags exactly like that dozens of times. Yet here he was. Feet stretched across the couch, sports playing on the television, one hand disappearing into the bag every few seconds as he absent-mindedly ate them like they were his favorite snack in the world. "Who are you?" The thought slipped into Tate's mind before he could stop it. Everything about Noah felt just a little off. Not wrong. Different. Too relaxed. Too amused. As though he had figured something out while everyone else was still trying to solve the puzzle. Tate searched Noah's face for an answer. Nothing. Just that faint smile. "Is there something going on with you?" Tate finally asked. "You don't eat those chips are gross." Noah looked down at the bag. "Oh, these." He reached in for another chip. "I bought them a year ago and forgot to throw them away before I moved out." He shrugged and popped the chip into his mouth. Then he laughed. Not loudly. Just enough. Enough to make Tate feel as though Noah had remembered a joke that nobody else had heard. Tate narrowed his eyes. "What?" Noah only smiled and kept chewing. The silence stretched. Tate hated silence when Noah created it on purpose. His foot began tapping against the floor. His arms folded tighter across his chest. "Aren't you going to answer my question?" Noah looked up at him, the corners of his mouth curling into an even bigger smile. "Not this year." Tate blinked. "What?" Noah tilted his head. "What was your name again?" He calmly reached into the bag, pulled out another chip, and ate it without taking his eyes off Tate. Tate let out a slow, disbelieving breath. "You're enjoying this?" Noah answered only with another quiet smile and the unmistakable crunch of yet another chip. Noah laughed quietly to himself. "I'm getting a funny sense of déjà vu." "Excuse me," Tate said. Noah smiled, reached into the bag, and ate another chip. "These chips are pretty great," he said in a very tight, almost theatrical voice. "I'm a bland young man who has to eat cardboard to be accepted by people, to be validated by his male asshole friends. He has to ask me what my name is." He nodded to himself as though the statement made perfect sense. Another crunch. Another chip. Tate stared at him. His eyebrows slowly drew together. What? Noah didn't answer. Instead, he shrugged, reached into the bag again, and continued eating. Tate searched Noah's face for any sign that he was joking, but Noah looked completely committed to whatever strange performance he was putting on. I have absolutely no idea what you just said, Tate admitted. Noah only smiled wider, as though Tate's confusion confirmed exactly what he had expected. Tate felt like he had walked into the middle of a conversation that had started hours earlier without him. Whatever Noah was talking about, whatever memory or joke he was reliving, Tate wasn't part of it. Noah reached into the bag once more. Another plain chip. Another loud crunch. He didn't even seem to notice how many he had eaten. They disappeared one after another while the sports announcers shouted excitedly from the television behind Tate's legs. Tate couldn't take his eyes off him. This wasn't the Noah he knew. Noah never sat around watching sports. Noah never insulted people for fun. Noah definitely never ate plain chips with this much enthusiasm. It was as though someone had swapped him overnight with a stranger who happened to look exactly like him. Noah swallowed and reached for another chip. And when you leave, he said casually, try not to cry, it's embarrassing. He pointed lazily toward the television with another chip. I'm trying to watch the game. His eyes drifted up to Tate. Can you move your fat ass? Tate looked as though Noah had suddenly grown horns. His mouth fell open. For several long seconds, he couldn't find a single word. Who are you? Tate whispered. Noah immediately burst into laughter. Real laughter. The kind that bent him forward on the couch. He laughed so hard he inhaled at the wrong moment, started coughing, and nearly choked on a chip. He pounded his fist against his chest, still laughing between coughs. Tate didn't move. He just stared. Part of him was offended. Part of him was worried. And another part wondered if Noah had finally snapped. You really have no clue, do you? You never act like this, Tate said quietly. Noah finally caught his breath. Oh really? He straightened himself, cleared his throat dramatically, and then, with startling accuracy, slipped into an exaggerated impression of Tate. Don't get emotional, Noah, because then I'll have to deal with it for once. And if I don't deal with it, I'll just shirk responsibility and accountability. Then I'll decide I'm not going to apologize, and afterward I'll act like it never happened because my personality and depth of character are as bland as these chips. Tate was in shock. To punctuate the sentence, Noah grabbed a huge handful of chips and shoved several into his mouth at once. Crunch. 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 He chewed with complete satisfaction, grinning the entire time. Tate stood frozen. The color had drained from his face. His arms, which had been folded defensively across his chest, slowly fell to his sides. He searched Noah's expression for some sign that this was only a joke, but there was something underneath the laughter that made him uneasy. You've been thinking about that, Tate said, his voice much quieter now. Noah only shrugged, still chewing. Another crunch. Another smile. Tate realized this wasn't random. Noah had remembered every word. And somehow, that unsettled him far more than the insults ever could. Tate stood rooted to the floor. He should have walked away. Instead, he stayed. Every instinct told him Noah would eventually run out of things to say. He didn't. Noah leaned farther back into the couch, one ankle crossed over the other, lazily reaching into the bag for another handful of chips. He barely glanced at the television anymore. Instead, all of his attention was on Tate. Another crunch. Another smile. Then Noah slipped effortlessly back into his impression of Tate. I'm an asshole, but everyone knows that. You can go as far as you want, Noah said in Tate's voice, but don't go too far. Because when I get lonely around 9 in the evening, I'll suddenly reach deep within myself to fake or find a believable amount of remorse, then act sorry so I don't have to freeze to death. Tate's jaw tightened. Noah ignored him. He nodded to himself as if Tate's imaginary words made perfect sense. Yeah, Noah continued in the same voice, that's how relationships work. Tate slowly turned around to face him completely. Would you stop? Noah didn't even acknowledge the request. He grabbed another chip. Crunch. Yes, Charles, Noah said sarcastically before slipping back into the impression. I have absolutely no idea what these people on the television are doing, but if I stare at sports long enough, maybe I'll finally have some social value besides jocks. Tate blinked. What are you even talking about? Noah's smile faded just enough to make the next words land harder. And Derek, Noah went on, I'm not going to stand up for the people I care about. I'll wait until you go upstairs and assault someone in this house before I finally grow a backbone and remember who the kid's name is. The room fell silent. Tate's face drained of color. That's not fair, he said quietly. Noah shrugged. Another handful of chips. Another loud crunch. I eat my own bland chips, Noah continued, because I don't want to have an emotional encounter with myself because my personality consists of my flaccid dick, my inability to do the right thing consistently, and when I'm finally in the mood to go to bed, I gain a conscience. He looked down into the nearly empty bag. The next time I tell people, Tate has internal reflection and takes accountability and recognizes what I do wrong, I'm going to think about how I did not know who Noah sounded like. And apparently I can't even recognize who I am anymore when the person I've spent 22 years with does a fucking impression of me. That finally stopped Tate cold. His anger dissolved into confusion. He searched Noah's face, hoping to find the smile again, hoping this was all some elaborate joke. Instead, Noah simply kept eating. Crunch. Crunch. Tate swallowed. I don't understand you today. No, Noah replied softly, almost to himself. Why would you? The only time you look at me is when I ignore you, avoid you, or don't give you enough attention, so you panic and make up for it so I won't leave you. I don't think you do. He reached into the bag again. There couldn't have been many chips left, yet he somehow found another handful. He crunched them loudly, never breaking eye contact with Tate. The television continued playing in the background after Noah clicked his remote. The crowd roared. The commentators shouted excitedly. Noah didn't seem to care about any of it. The game had become nothing more than a stage prop. Tate stood frozen in front of the television, unable to decide whether he should defend himself, leave, or simply keep listening. Every impression Noah made landed harder than the last. He had never seen Noah like this. Not once in 22 years. Noah swallowed the chips and casually waved his hand toward the television. Oh, and move your fat ass, he said. I want to watch a football game that I haven't followed my entire life, but I'm going to hide the fact so my brothers-in-law, who need testosterone injections to feel manly, don't think I'm gay. Another chip. Crunch. I'll just pretend I know what I'm looking at on the TV so my in-laws don't realize I'd rather admire the back of a woman's head while I stand behind her than actually have a mutual mature conversation with a female I don't imagine naked. Tate looked horrified. What? Noah didn't answer. Instead, he shifted effortlessly into another voice. Noah's expression changed just enough that Tate recognized exactly who he was impersonating. In Chloe's voice, Noah said, Unfortunately, I'm married to Tate. Tate's stomach dropped. Noah continued, matching Chloe's cadence with unsettling accuracy. I've been married to this man for a year, and I can't figure out why he'd rather sleep with his male buddy than with me. Tate's face flushed. Noah. Is there something wrong with me? Noah continued in Chloe's voice. Did I do something wrong? He paused dramatically. Oh, that's right, I married him, that's what I did wrong. Another loud crunch echoed through the room. I was so lonely that I settled for a man who would rather stare at a wall, get drunk, talk in a stranger's voice, or disappear into his own head than actually work on our marriage. When my girlfriends ask me what my husband's favorite way to spend his evening is, it's sleeping curled around his buddy instead of having a conversation with me, his wife. Tate opened his mouth but nothing came out. Noah never looked away. When my girlfriends ask me what's wrong with my marriage, he continued, I tell them nothing's wrong, unless you expect me to feel loved, appreciated, or enjoy the person I sleep next to. He gave a dry laugh. Oh, that's right, I don't sleep next to him. He hides down the hall in his childhood bedroom, consistently breaks through the spare room door so he can sleep nude on top of his male buddy who's almost 30 years old. The words hung in the room. Tate looked as though he'd been slapped. His breathing became shallow. His eyes darted away for the first time all afternoon. Stop. Noah ignored him. Still in a mocking tone, he added, "That's classic Tate." The sarcasm in Noah's voice was unmistakable. Tate rubbed a hand over his face. "This isn't funny anymore." Noah quietly reached into the nearly empty bag for one last chip. "Crunch." "No," he said calmly. "I don't think it ever was." Tate reached over and switched the television off again. The room fell quiet. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. Noah slowly turned his head toward the blank screen. Then toward Tate. He didn't look irritated. If anything, he looked entertained. Tate searched Noah's face, hoping he had finally broken through whatever strange mood had taken hold of him. "Noah." No response. "I'm talking to you." Noah looked into the nearly empty chip bag, tipped it upside down and shook it. A few crumbs fell into his hand. He ate them, then peered inside again. "I'm all out of chips," Noah announced with exaggerated disappointment. Tate threw his hands into the air. "Would you stop with the chips for 5 seconds?" Ahem. Noah stood stretched lazily and patted the empty bag against his palm. "Well," he said thoughtfully in Tate's voice, "I guess I'll have to waddle on over to the refrigerator and find something really masculine to eat or drink." He started walking toward the kitchen. "You know, so nobody starts wondering what's wrong with me." Tate stared after him. "What are you talking about?" Noah ignored the question. He opened the refrigerator door and looked inside as though he were narrating a nature documentary. "Let's see." He folded his arms. "Do I want a hot dog?" He immediately shook his head. "Better not, might give people ideas about eggplants." Tate pinched the bridge of his nose. "Oh my God." "Milk," Noah continued. "No, don't want to do that, might confuse people that I suck dick." He shut the refrigerator and wandered toward the pantry instead. "Oh, a steak." He pretended to consider it seriously. "Better not do that either. We all know what eat the meat means." Tate couldn't decide whether he wanted to laugh or scream. "Noah." Noah held up one finger. "I'm thinking." He peered into another cabinet. "I know, I'll make popcorns." He smiled triumphantly. "Because there aren't any euphemisms about being gay and eating popcorn." Tate let out a long, exhausted sigh. "I have absolutely no idea what reality you're living in." Noah nodded as if Tate had proven his point. Then, without missing a beat, he slipped effortlessly back into his impression of Tate. "I better get myself a beer," he said in Tate's voice. "Can't let anybody think I'm emotionally available." He mimed taking a long drink. Much safer to look tough than to have an honest conversation. Tate's expression hardened. "I never said that." "No," Noah replied, still using Tate's cadence. "You just spent years demonstrating it." The joke vanished from the room. Tate swallowed. His shoulders sagged. Every sarcastic impression Noah performed seemed ridiculous on the surface, yet somehow each one carried enough truth to make Tate flinch. For the first time since Noah started talking, Tate had nothing left to say. Noah simply shrugged, turned back toward the pantry and muttered to himself. "Popcorn it is." Noah wandered back into the living room with a can of beer in one hand and the bowl of popcorn in the other. He dropped onto the couch, stretched out until he occupied nearly the entire thing, and propped his feet onto the coffee table like he intended to stay there all afternoon. Tate remained standing. Watching. Waiting. Hoping Noah would finally stop. Instead, Noah took a long sip of his beer, glanced down at his own clothes and laughed to himself. "Oh, have you seen my fashion sense lately?" he said, slipping effortlessly into another exaggerated impression of Tate. "I'm a label queen, I've got more flair than Liberace, but my taste in guy friends is absolutely terrible." He nodded solemnly as if he'd just delivered profound wisdom. Tate's face twisted into a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "What?" Noah ignored him. He shoveled a handful of popcorn into his mouth. Crunch. Crunch. A single kernel lodged between his teeth. He stopped chewing. "Oh no." He picked at his teeth dramatically. "I've got a popcorn kernel stuck in my teeth." He looked toward the ceiling as though faced with a terrible moral dilemma. "I'd better suck up the pain." He sighed theatrically. Because actually taking pride in how I look and how my smile makes me attractive to other men makes me feel like going to the dentist is gay. Tate stared at him. You've completely lost your mind. Noah didn't even look up. Instead, he reached for his beer. With exaggerated drama, he hooked a finger under the tab and slowly popped it open. PSSSD. He held the can in the air for a moment, as if it deserved applause. Then he tilted his head back and chugged nearly the entire thing without stopping. Tate watched in stunned silence. Noah lowered the empty can with a long, exaggerated sigh of satisfaction. Ugh. Then came a burp. Burpee. It started small. Then it kept going. And going. It echoed through the room with ridiculous frat boy enthusiasm. Tate looked horrified. Are you serious? Noah kept burping. He even raised one finger, asking Tate to wait until he was finished. Nearly 20 seconds later, the performance finally ended. Noah patted his chest proudly. There. He smiled. Now everyone knows I'm one of the guys. Tate rubbed both hands over his face. I don't know who you are anymore. Noah leaned back into the couch, completely at ease. No, he said with a faint smile. I don't think you ever did. Noah wasn't slowing down. If anything, every impression became sharper. He settled deeper into the couch, one arm stretched across the backrest as though he owned the entire room. The bowl of popcorn rested in his lap, the empty beer can on the coffee table beside him. Tate hadn't moved. He stood in the middle of the living room, arms hanging awkwardly at his sides. At first he had been irritated. Then confused. Now he wasn't sure what he was feeling. It was unsettling to watch someone who had spent years swallowing his opinions suddenly empty them all at once. Noah didn't even look at him. He simply smiled to himself, reached for another handful of popcorn and slipped back into his exaggerated impression of Tate. So, when my friends ask me why I still sleep in the same bed and on top of a 27-year-old man, Noah said in Tate's cadence, I just tell them it's comfortable. He shrugged. Sounds better than admitting I don't even remember which room my wife sleeps in because I'm never there at night. Tate flinched. Noah continued as though he hadn't heard him. I've got to eat masculine food. Another handful of popcorn. I've got to drink things that don't resemble bodily fluids. Another crunch. I've got to spend time with alpha male assholes so nobody looks at me long enough to start asking questions. Tate slowly shook his head. Stop doing my voice. Noah ignored him. The funny part, he continued, all my friends are involved in a betting pool wondering when I'm finally going to pull my head out of my ass. Tate stared at him. His face had gone pale. You don't believe that? No. Noah tilted his head but stayed in character. The only reason I even have these friends is that the buddy I still sleep with introduced me to them. He gave a dry laugh. I've spent 10 years wondering whether they'd want anything to do with me if Noah disappeared. The humor in Noah's voice began to fade. Maybe they don't respect me. Maybe they only tolerate me. Maybe the only interesting thing about me is that I happen to know Noah. Tate swallowed hard. His eyes dropped to the floor. For the first time all afternoon, he didn't interrupt. Noah looked toward the ceiling. I wonder if they've all gotten into that betting pool since Brown. He smiled without any warmth. When, how, where, the day Tate finally realizes what everyone else already knows. He paused. That he's a fraud. The room felt suddenly much quieter. Tate's jaw tightened. You don't mean that. Noah didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into the refrigerator, returned with a second beer and calmly opened it. PSSSD. Without hesitation, he raised the can and drank nearly the entire thing in one long pull. Tate watched in disbelief. What are you doing? Noah lowered the can. He let out a long, satisfied sigh. Then came another enormous belch. Burpee. It echoed through the room, loud, theatrical, and absurdly overdone. It seemed to last forever. Tate closed his eyes. You're impossible. Noah wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. There, he said with mock satisfaction. Now I've reached peak masculinity. If any straight men around here or in this house have any doubts about how masculine I am, I'll be spreading my seed in every ass in Lowe's Angels by midnight. Tate looked at him for a long moment. The sarcasm was still there. The impressions were still ridiculous. But underneath all of it, Tate could hear something else. Fear. Self-doubt. And years of resentment that Noah had apparently been carrying in silence. For the first time since the conversation began, Tate wasn't angry anymore. He just looked at Noah with an expression he hadn't worn all afternoon. Concern. Noah wasn't done. He leaned farther back into the couch, his second beer dangling loosely from one hand while the television continued playing to a room where no one was watching it anymore. The football game had become background noise. The real performance was happening in the living room. Tate stood motionless. His heart pounded harder with every impression. At first Noah's jokes had seemed random. Now they felt calculated. Each one peeled away another layer. Each one exposed something Noah had apparently been thinking for years. Noah, Tate said quietly. Noah looked up for only a second. Then, without warning, his expression softened, and he slipped into an eerily convincing impression of Chloe. I was with my girlfriends earlier today, Noah said in Chloe's voice. They asked me why my husband doesn't care who I fantasize about during sex because any socialite with a brain would know I'm not fantasizing about my husband because I don't know him well enough. Tate can't and won't allow me into his thoughts and feelings long enough to experience consistent intimacy. Tate's face tightened. Stop. Noah continued as though he hadn't heard him. And I told them. He paused dramatically. Because Tate is more worried about who Noah is thinking about while the blonde is jerking off than he is about who his own wife is thinking about while she comes. Tate's eyes widened. No, Noah, don't. Noah kept going. Oh, sure, he said, switching back to Tate's voice for only a moment before gesturing toward the television. I watch sports, everybody's buying my heterosexual facade. Then he returned to Chloe's voice. I don't know, he said. Susie told me they've had a betting pool for 10 years. He smiled faintly. They're taking bets on what holiday it'll happen. What holiday? Tate asked almost involuntarily. The holiday when Tate or Noah finally pulls our heads out of our asses and finally talks about the blue elephant in the room. Noah gave a dry little laugh. Tate rubbed both hands over his face. This isn't funny anymore. Noah ignored him. At the rate we're going, he continued in Chloe's voice, we'll probably be voting for the 80th president of the United States before either Tate Blue or I figure it out. Tate let out a slow breath. You don't know what you're talking about. No. Noah asked softly. Then, slipping back into his impression of Tate, he puffed out his chest. I'm big macho and a straight Tate Blue. He took another drink from his beer before continuing. I spend more time worrying about what Noah Lunas is thinking during a manual self-hand job than I do paying attention to my own marriage. Tate's expression crumpled. Enough. His voice was barely above a whisper. I said enough. Noah looked at him. For the first time since the impressions had begun, neither of them spoke. The silence lingered. Tate's hands trembled slightly at his sides. He wanted to argue. He wanted to deny everything Noah had just said. Instead, all he could manage was a quiet. Why are you doing this? Noah's smile faded. He looked down at the beer in his hand before answering. Because nobody listened when I said it in my own voice. The words hit Tate harder than any joke had. He opened his mouth to respond. Nothing came out. For the first time all afternoon, Tate had no comeback. Only silence. Noah wasn't looking at Tate anymore. He seemed to have crossed some invisible line. The jokes were still there. The impressions were still sharp. But they no longer sounded like someone trying to be funny. They sounded like someone who had spent years rehearsing conversations that had never happened. Tate remained standing in front of the dark television. He had stopped interrupting. Stopped arguing. Every time he opened his mouth, Noah simply rolled over him with another impression, another accusation, another joke that somehow hurt more because Noah was smiling while he said it. The room felt strangely small. Noah casually reached for another beer, hooked his finger under the tab and opened it. PSSSD. He took a long drink, draining nearly the entire can without stopping. Tate watched in silence. He didn't recognize the person sitting on the couch. Noah lowered the can and let out another long, exaggerated belch before settling back with a deeply satisfied sigh. Belch. Then he slipped into Tate's voice one last time. Perfect, Noah said in the impression. Now I've got all those angels fooled. I've maintained my plausible deniability, my fragile little glass closet stays standing, and my whole house of cards doesn't collapse. He laughed quietly to himself. I must really think the blonde's an idiot. He shook his head. Because the only person in Lowe's Angels who actually believes we're just buddies. Noah looked directly at Tate. Is Tate blue? The words hung in the air. Tate's face lost what little color it had left. His lips parted but nothing came out. He looked as though he'd been punched. Noah looked away again, as if the conversation had already ended in his mind. Still speaking in Tate's voice, he continued with bitter sarcasm. I'll go sleep with some woman whose name I won't remember. He gave a hollow laugh. It's easier than admitting who I'm actually thinking about during sex while I wonder if he actually slept with my uncle. Tate's breathing became uneven. Stop. His voice cracked. Please. Noah didn't acknowledge the plea. You can leave now, Noah, he continued in the impression. Go upstairs and cry yourself to sleep. He shrugged. But don't go too far. A faint, humorless smile crossed his face. I'll probably apologize later so I don't lose the person who keeps my side of the bed warm. Silence. Noah finally stopped talking. He stared past Tate out the window as though there was nothing left to say. The room was so quiet that Tate could hear the television commentators through the muted speakers. His hands trembled. He wanted to tell Noah he was wrong. He wanted to deny every word. Instead, he stood there, unable to find a single sentence that didn't sound empty. For the first time in 23 years, Tate realized Noah wasn't asking to be understood anymore. He was simply finished explaining himself. Tate stood there for another few seconds, waiting for Noah to say something else. Nothing came. Noah remained on the couch, staring at the television as if Tate had already left. He didn't call after him, he didn't apologize, he didn't even look up. Don't go too far, bed warmer, Noah said in a Tate tone of voice. I get really jealous when I can't have what I want when I want it, how I want it, and as long as I want it. Be back by 9 or I'll call the police and report your car stolen because you dare to prioritize someone else instead of me. I need my emotional diaper changed by Noah, and if he's not home by 9, I'll turn into a pumpkin or a jealous hazel-eyed toddler who stomps my foot to get his attention. Tate swallowed hard. Without another word, he turned, walked through the living room and yanked open the front door. Bang! The slam echoed through the house. Noah never came after him. The drive home was quiet. Tate replayed the afternoon over and over in his mind. The chips. The football game. The beer. The ridiculous burping. Every sarcastic impression. He understood what Noah had been doing. None of it had been random. The plain chips, the sports channel, the exaggerated attempts to sound masculine, it had all been Noah's caricature of Tate. Every joke had been aimed at the image Noah believed Tate had spent years trying to project. Tate just didn't understand why. Was Noah being an asshole? Or was Tate only angry because there had been too much truth buried underneath the jokes? That question followed him all the way home. For the first time in a long while, Tate couldn't dismiss Noah's words as nonsense. They kept circling back, refusing to leave him alone. When he pulled into the driveway, the house looked exactly as it always had. Normal. Quiet. Safe. Tate stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Chloe, he called. He needed to find his wife. For reasons he couldn't explain, Noah's impressions had made him wonder what she would say if she had been sitting on that couch listening to every word. Noah waited until the house was quiet before he called Susie. The moment she answered, he barely got the words out. You are not going to believe what I just did. Susie immediately heard something in his voice. What happened? Noah leaned back on the couch, looking at the empty chip bag still sitting on the coffee table. I did an impression of Tate. There was a pause. Then Noah started explaining. The chips. The sports channel. The beer. The ridiculous over-the-top version of Tate he had created, the version who was obsessed with looking a certain way, proving something, and avoiding every uncomfortable truth. By the time Noah got halfway through the story, Susie was already laughing. Not a polite laugh. A full, uncontrollable laugh. No way, she gasped. Noah smiled. Yes way. You actually said that to Tate. Every word. Susie's laughter got louder. You sat there in front of Tate and did a whole impression of him. Apparently I had a lot to say. Susie tried to calm herself down, but immediately started laughing again. Noah, I'm sorry, but that's the funniest part. Tate didn't even recognize himself. Noah looked down. Not at first. Susie shook her head, still laughing. That's what makes it so funny. You were literally describing him and he was standing there trying to figure out who you were talking about. Noah smiled despite himself. He thought I was just being ridiculous. Well, Susie laughed again. Maybe because you were being ridiculous. Noah chuckled. But, she continued, you don't get that worked up over something unless there's something underneath it. The smile faded slightly from Noah's face. Susie noticed the silence. Was he mad? Yeah. Did he understand why? Noah looked toward the television. I don't know. Susie softened her voice. Well, at least he heard you. Noah didn't answer. Because that was the part he wasn't sure about. Tate had heard every word. Whether he had actually listened was another question. Noah was sure Tate would stay away that night. After everything that had happened in the living room, after all the words that had been thrown between them, Noah couldn't imagine Tate willingly coming back. He expected anger. He expected distance. He expected Tate to make some grand statement by sleeping somewhere else, somewhere that proved Noah had finally pushed him too far. And in a strange way, Noah thought that would be easier. Because if Tate stayed away, Noah wouldn't have to wonder whether his words had actually gotten through. He wouldn't have to see Tate's face. He wouldn't have to deal with the uncomfortable truth that underneath all the sarcasm and impressions, he had been trying to say something real. The evening passed quietly. No messages. No phone calls. No footsteps. Noah lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the afternoon over and over. The ridiculous football game. The bland chips. The fake beer-fueled confidence. The way Tate looked at him was like he was seeing a stranger. Maybe that was the point. Maybe Noah had finally shown Tate the version of him that had been buried underneath all the years of pretending. Then at exactly 9:05 the bedroom door opened. Noah didn't move. He kept his eyes closed. He heard Tate step inside. A pause. Then the mattress shifted as Tate slipped into bed beside him. Noah opened one eye. For a second he was almost amused. After everything, after storming out and slamming the door, Tate still came back. Tate stared straight ahead, pretending this was completely normal. No apology. No explanation. No acknowledgement that he had left. Noah looked at the clock. Then back at Tate. A small smile appeared. You're 5 minutes late. Tate turned his head. What? Noah's smile grew. You heard me. Tate frowned. Late for what? Noah shrugged. Your dramatic return. Tate stared at him, already annoyed. I didn't make a dramatic return. No. No. Noah looked toward the ceiling. Interesting, because from where I was sitting, I was expecting you around 9. Tate rolled his eyes. You're impossible. And yet Noah said, here you are. Tate looked away. That was when Noah slipped into his impression. A very good impression. I could have frozen. Tate immediately went still. His eyes shifted toward Noah. Noah. But Noah continued, perfectly copying the tone. Don't you care about anyone but yourself? Tate's entire body flinched. The reaction was immediate. Small but unmistakable. Noah noticed. The joke wasn't what got him. It was hearing his own words reflected back. Noah kept going. Don't you realize I can replace you? Tate's jaw tightened. I can call somebody else to fill this bed. Noah, stop. But Noah continued the performance. You should feel lucky that I put up with you. Tate looked away. You should feel lucky that I deem you worthy enough to have a job being a bed warmer. The room fell silent. Tate's expression changed. The anger was there. But so was something else. Something Noah hadn't expected. Hurt. Noah saw it. For a moment the impression almost broke. But he finished. You should feel grateful that I bestowed my favor upon you. Noah smiled, satisfied with his imitation. Tate didn't laugh. He didn't argue. He just stared at him. Because the worst part was that Noah wasn't making up a completely foreign person. He was exaggerating something Tate recognized. The coldness. The defensiveness. The way he turned emotions into jokes before anyone could see they mattered. Finally Tate spoke quietly. You've been thinking about this all day. Noah's smile faded. Yeah. Tate looked back at the ceiling. Neither of them said anything else. For once there was no impression. No sarcasm. No performance. Just two people lying next to each other, both realizing the jokes had been covering something much more serious. 10 minutes later, the room had gone quiet again. Neither of them had said much after Noah's last impression. The tension was still there, sitting between them. Tate lay on his back, staring at the ceiling, pretending he wasn't thinking about every word Noah had said. Then the mattress shifted. Noah moved carefully, trying not to wake him. Tate noticed anyway. He heard the quiet sound of drawers opening. The rustle of clothes. The soft footsteps across the room. His eyes opened. Noah was standing near the edge of the bed, pulling his shirt back on. For a moment Tate just watched him. Confused. Then he reached over and turned on the lamp. The sudden light filled the room. Where are you going? Noah froze. Slowly he turned around. His expression was unreadable. Why do you care? Tate frowned. What? Noah looked at him for a long second. Then he gave a small, humorless smile. You're not in my life anymore, Tate. The words landed harder than Tate expected. Noah. No, Noah interrupted quietly, we're not buddies. Tate stared at him. Noah picked up his jacket. It's none of your business. The room became painfully quiet. Tate looked like he wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Noah continued. You chose a lane. He slipped his jacket on. So stay in it. Tate's expression changed. The anger from earlier was gone. Now he just looked confused. Almost hurt. But since you're asking, Noah said, reaching for the door, I'm going to Riley's. Tate sat up slightly. Riley's? Noah glanced back. Yeah. A pause. Then softer. You asked. Noah stood by the door, jacket on, ready to leave. Tate watched him from the bed, still trying to understand how they had gone from lying next to each other to this. A part of him wanted to stop Noah. A part of him wanted to ask where he thought he was going and why it suddenly mattered. But pride kept him quiet. Noah noticed. He always noticed. He looked back at Tate, his expression somewhere between anger and exhaustion. I'm sure your wife is looking for you today, Noah said. Tate's face tightened. Noah continued. Why don't you go home and play the facade of being the perfect husband and domestic provider? The words hit harder than Tate expected. Noah opened the door slightly. And I'll go spend time with Riley where I don't have to perform. Tate sat up. Noah. But Noah shook his head. No. His voice wasn't loud. That made it worse. Before you say you're not playing the role of a husband, maybe you should ask Chloe if she feels the same way I do. Tate looked away. The mention of Chloe made the room feel colder. Because Noah wasn't just talking about himself anymore. He was talking about the person waiting at home. The person Tate kept insisting he loved. Noah paused at the doorway. His hand was still on the handle when he looked back at Tate. The anger in his face had faded into something quieter. Something more tired. And if Chloe doesn't turn you on, Noah said, his voice low, then why don't you go sleep with someone like Jay? Tate looked up sharply. What? Noah shook his head. Maybe she'll make you feel something. The words weren't said like a joke this time. There was no performance. No impression. Just Noah. I don't want to spend another night pretending I don't notice what's happening. Tate stared at him. Noah looked back toward the bedroom. Right now, I want to actually sleep in a bed with someone I respect. A pause. And someone who respects me. Tate's expression shifted. Because that was the part that hurt. Not the accusation. Not the anger. The sadness behind it. Noah continued. Because if you had another shiny option, you'd be there. Tate opened his mouth to argue. Nothing came out. Noah nodded slightly, as if that silence answered his question. That's what I've been trying to tell you. He stepped toward the door. I don't want to be the person you choose because you're out of options. The front door waited open behind him. I want to be the person you choose because you actually want me there. Tate watched him. For once, there was no sarcasm left to hide behind. Don't cry on your way out, Noah added quietly. Tate looked back at him. For a moment, Noah almost looked like he wanted to take it back. Almost. But then the wall came back up. Noah stepped into the hallway. The front door opened. Then slammed shut. Bang! Tate stayed sitting on the bed, staring at the empty doorway. He had spent the entire day being angry at Noah for mocking him. But now that Noah was gone, the anger felt harder to hold. Because underneath everything Noah had said, underneath all the ridiculous impressions and sarcasm, there had been one question Tate couldn't ignore. What if Noah wasn't the only person who had been pretending? Tate stayed sitting there, staring at the empty doorway. For years, Noah had always been the one who stayed. The one who came back. The one who made excuses. And now, for the first time, Tate felt the weight of what it meant when Noah stopped chasing him. As Noah drove toward Riley's house, the anger from earlier slowly began to fade. The streets passed by in familiar patterns, but his mind wasn't on the road. It was somewhere else. It was a year and a half ago. 9 months ago, Talia sat at the same table the next afternoon after her meal with Noah, who had given her envelopes and a scarf to return to Tate. Her hands folded neatly around her coffee cup, eyes fixed on the door. She had arrived early, not out of eagerness but resolve. This was not a reunion, it was an obligation she intended to control. She would keep her promise. It had been 3 months since Tate abandoned Noah and moved into an apartment with Chloe, leaving her blonde son to mourn alone. When Tate arrived, she would tell him only what she had agreed to tell him, that the envelope had been delivered and that Noah had sent a box of his belongings to be returned. Nothing more, no descriptions, no reactions, no pain translated into language he could later reshape into something survivable. She would not tell Tate how hurt Noah was. She would not tell him how he looked. She would not tell him how much it had cost Noah to sit across from her and say no to the family adoption without flinching. Most of all, she would not betray the only fragile hope she had left, to remain connected, in whatever limited way Noah allowed. To the son who had slipped through every crack love was supposed to seal. Talia glanced at the empty chair across from her. For years, she had tried to protect both boys by softening truths, by cushioning consequences, by believing time would fix what avoidance had broken. Now she understood protection had limits, silence had a cost. This time she chose correctly. When Tate finally walked into the restaurant, she straightened, not to welcome him but to hold the line. Her son looked very good, healthy, and his clothes were very fine and expensive. He looked like he hadn't spent one moment thinking about Noah nor being upset or emotional. That reality caused Talia anger and disbelief. Talia's son, Tate, has been inseparable from Noah for 22 years, but she and any of Tate's friends hadn't remarked that Tate had reacted to leaving Noah and ending their intimate, undefined relationship. It's been months, Tate, Talia said evenly as he slid into the chair. The same chair her beloved Noah had sat in the day before, the place where boundaries had been drawn and words finally told the truth. She didn't soften it, she didn't smile. You should have called me once a month and visited our home frequently. The words weren't loud, but they carried the weight of expectation unmet, of a mother who had waited through silence she should never have had to endure. Her eyes stayed on him, steady, measuring, not accusing, just nomming the failure plainly. This isn't about schedules, she continued, voice calm but firm. It's about showing up, and you didn't. The chair creaked as he shifted. The table between them felt crowded with everything he hadn't said, every call he hadn't made. Talia folded her hands. "Before we discuss anything else," she said, "you need to understand that." Tate swallowed, looking uncomfortable with his mother's emotional outburst, so he chose to change the subject to something else. Talia noticed it was the first thing that came to Tate's mind, and yet he hadn't shown an ounce of emotion or regret for how he had terribly treated Noah. "How is he?" Tate asked, almost too quickly, like the question had been waiting at the back of his throat the whole time. Talia didn't hesitate. "I won't talk about that," she said. Her voice was calm, final, no apology woven into it, no opening left to push against. She held his gaze long enough to make sure he understood this wasn't cruelty. It was a boundary, one she intended to keep. "That's not my information to give," she added quietly. The space between them filled with what she wasn't saying, and for once she let the silence do the work. "We want contact with our other son," Talia said steadily, not unkind but unmovable. "But there's a condition." She leaned forward just enough to make sure he was listening. "He doesn't want any information about you from either of us, and I won't answer your inquiries about him." Her voice didn't waver. "That includes how he's doing, where he is, or anything about his life." She held his gaze firm now. "So don't ask me, Tate, because if you do, I'll have to tell Noah that you don't respect him." The line settled between them, clear, unmistakable. "This isn't negotiable," she added quietly. "It's the only way we're allowed to remain in his life at all." And for the first time, Tate wasn't being managed, softened, or protected. He was being told the rules. "Don't go looking for him, son," Talia said, her voice firm now, stripped of any softness she might once have offered. "And if you see him in public, you leave before your presence upsets him." Tate opened his mouth, but she raised a hand, not angrily, just decisively. "Don't ask Susie," she continued. "Don't ask anyone Noah knows, don't fish for information, don't look for a chance encounter, don't try to pass messages through other people." She leaned in, eyes unwavering. "Leave him alone." There was no malice in her tone, only protection, the kind that comes after too much damage has already been done. "This isn't punishment," she added quietly. "It's respect, something he asked for, something he deserves." Tate smirked. "I'm not going to look for him," Tate said. "I'm done with him. I just want to make sure that you are fine with the particulars so we can move forward. I was asking about him out of pleasantries, not out of genuine interest." She sat back, the boundary now fully drawn, immovable. "Don't be an asshole, Tate, for once," she said. "Do the loving thing by doing nothing at all. Promise me you'll honor our son's requests and ours." And she waited, no longer as a mediator, not as a buffer, but as a mother who had finally chosen to stand where the harm had landed. "I promise," Tate said. Talia studied him closely then. Her eldest son looked good, healthy, well-fed, composed in the way people are when they've rebuilt a life that functions. He wasn't happy, but she could tell that wasn't what he'd been chasing anyway. Tate had never oriented himself around happiness. He had always chased stability, even when it came at someone else's expense. "This is for you," she said, sliding the blue clothing box across the table. He reached for it instinctively, fingers already curling under the lid. "Wait," she said sharply. Her hand came down on the box, stopping him. "It's not a gift," she continued, voice precise, deliberate. "Noah is returning something he stole from you." Tate froze. "He doesn't want anything of yours in his life," Talia added, "and he doesn't want anything of his in yours." She removed her hand from the box slowly, as if disengaging from something volatile. "Take it," she said, "but understand what it is. This isn't reconciliation, it isn't sentiment, it's a correction." The box sat between them, suddenly heavier than its contents. "This," she finished quietly, "is him closing the door." "I know," Tate said quietly. "I didn't take it any other way." He lifted the lid then, slower now, a faint tension settling into his shoulders as he looked inside. The first thing he saw was a long-forgotten item from decades ago, something he hadn't thought about in years, something he'd assumed was gone, misplaced, or thrown out somewhere along the way. Seeing it there felt disorienting, like stumbling across a piece of his past that should no longer exist. How in the world did that boy have this? The question landed hard, not with nostalgia but with unease. There was no obvious explanation, no context. Just the object itself preserved, returned, stripped of meaning except the one implied by its presence. Then he touched the green scarf, carefully folded, intentionally placed. It was the scarf Tate had been given the morning after he lost his virginity by Jay as a memento of their time together. Under the scarf was a handwritten note. Tate recognized Noah's handwriting instantly. His fingers hovered over the paper, hesitating not because he didn't know what it was but because he understood what it wasn't. This wasn't sentiment. It wasn't reconciliation. It was evidence of something that had survived quietly and was now being deliberately removed from Noah's life, placed back into Tate's hands like an unwanted truth. Tate didn't read the note yet. He just sat there, the box open, the weight of it settling in. This wasn't a return of objects. It was a severance. "That's a beautiful scarf," his mom said, her voice soft as her eyes rested on the green fabric. Tate nodded in agreement, then added quietly, "I bought it for Noah when we were teens," Tate lied. "I meant it as a gift but it got lost, I couldn't ever find it." He paused, the weight of the realization settling in. Somehow, he had it all these years. The box sat open between them, the scarf folded neatly inside, no explanation offered. Just proof that something Tate had long believed gone had existed elsewhere, preserved without his knowledge. "Why has he held on to it for 8 years?" Tate asked aloud, the question slipping out before he could stop it. Talia didn't answer right away. She looked at the scarf again, then at her son, and her expression softened with a sadness that carried no blame, only truth. "I think," she said gently, "he believed it was something you wore, and he wanted to save it as a reminder of your closeness." Tate's brow furrowed, his throat tightening. "He loved you so much, honey," she continued, her voice steady but heavy with feeling. "This scarf wasn't just fabric to him, it was a symbol of his affection, of his devotion to you." The words landed quietly, but they struck deep. Noah, unknown to anyone, had kept a symbol of Tate's hidden love for 8 years without an iota of knowledge of what he held or kept secret. If Noah understood what that scarf meant to Tate and who gave it to him, the blonde would have thrown it away immediately without a second thought. Talia reached across the table and rested her hand lightly over his. "He's letting go now," she said softly. "That's what this is." And for the first time since opening the box, Tate didn't argue with the truth of it. One of Tate's lovers had gifted the scarf to a young Tate as an important milestone. Noah thought the sacred item of clothing was a mere garment Tate wore to impress rich people, not for the terrifying reality Tate knew it to be. Tate opened the letter in the box and read the words to himself. "Dear Mr. Blue, I am meeting your mother to conclude what little remains of the past. I thought that returning this scarf would be important because it's your own property. I am returning the scarf I took from you. Taking it was an error, sentiment overriding judgment. Do not assign significance to that action. I was never anything important to you, but I got caught up in childish dreams. My sentiment towards you was youthful infatuation and brotherly affection. I regarded you as a familiar, long-standing, close companion and nothing more. Despite the persistent external misinterpretations you gave, I never loved you. You were correct in your assessment over the years. I was useful, I was convenient. The check you provided sufficiently compensates for the time I will not recover. You kept your word for that promise you made me in the car after I met Wayne. I should have listened to what you warned me about that day. Consider all matters between us resolved. Sincerely, Mr. Lunas." Talia exhaled slowly after he finished reading, her gaze never leaving his face. "I can't say I blame him, honey," she said quietly. There was no accusation in her voice, only disappointment that had settled too long to be sharp anymore. "After this, I really can't." She reached for the edge of the table, steadying herself. "Why did you have to treat him the terrible way you harm everyone else?" she asked. "Why did you have to do that to someone who never stopped choosing you?" Tate swallowed, eyes still on the paper, as if he looked up the words might become real in a way he couldn't manage. "I told him I would hurt him at some point," he said at last. Tate never wanted to remember the day he said that to Noah, Wayne, and the tears he cried while his close bedfellow offered comfort to him on the side of the road, not defensively, not proudly, just stating a fact. "I warned him." Talia's mouth tightened. "That doesn't absolve you of pain." "I know," he replied. She nodded once, accepting the answer without forgiving it. "You don't get credit for predicting the damage," she said softly, "especially when you went ahead and did it anyway." The note lay between them, unmoving, merciless in its clarity. "He believed you," she added. Even when you told him who you were, he stayed, and when you finally left, you didn't do it cleanly. He's accepting what you did with no theatrics, no cruelty, no begging." She tapped the paper gently. "This is restraint, this is discipline, this is someone who learned the cost of proximity to you. I warned him, he was dumb for staying and proving me right." Talia was furious. Her son had no guilt or remorse for hurting Noah. "For what it's worth," Talia continued, her voice steady now, "this isn't revenge, he's not punishing you." She looked at him then, really looked. "He's done." She leaned back in her chair. "And that," she said, "is something you can't fix." Talia's voice softened, but the warning underneath it didn't. "I hoped he wouldn't shut your father and me out of his life," she said quietly. "If he had, I would have held you responsible." She didn't look away, completely. Tate swore, then continued. "I won't lose another son because of your adolescent, shameless behavior," she continued. "That connection exists because he allowed it, not because you earned it." She paused, then asked the question she had carried for years. "Why couldn't you love him?" Tate's answer came too quickly, as something rehearsed. "Men don't love men," he said flatly. "It's wrong, it's destructive." The words landed heavy and ugly between them. Talia stared at him, disbelief giving way to something colder. "That's what you told yourself?" she asked. "That's how you justified taking everything he gave and returning nothing?" He didn't respond. "He didn't ask you to be something you weren't," she said. "He asked you to care, to choose him honestly, to stop punishing him for wanting closeness." She shook her head slowly. "You didn't leave because it was wrong, you left because it required courage you don't have." Tate looked away. "And now," Talia added, her voice steady and final, "you don't get to rewrite what you did as morality. You hurt him, deliberately, repeatedly, and he walked away with discipline instead of destruction. You're a fucking coward, Tate." She gestured to the letter on the table. "That's not bitterness," she said, "that's someone who survived you." The silence that followed wasn't angry. It was the sound of a truth that could no longer be defended. "What was in that letter I gave him?" Talia asked sharply, all the softness gone. "It better not hurt him again." She leaned forward, eyes hard. "I will thump your head if it does." Tate didn't bristle, he didn't joke, he just shook his head once. "It was an invitation to my wedding with Chloe," he said. "I'm engaged, there's nothing in there that touches him anymore. I'm free of him as I planned. It's a few years later than I hoped. Chloe felt pity for Noah and forced me to send the letter to the blonde as a peace offering to get her in your good graces." She searched his face, measuring the answer. Talia looked at him with something close to pity now. "You made me give him an announcement for your wedding after you left him without a word. Why do you sabotage the best things you've ever found?" she asked quietly. "Why do you hate gay people, honey?" His answer came fast, defensive, rehearsed. "They're perverts," he said. "They want sex no matter the wreckage they leave behind." He scoffed, ugliness sharpening his voice. "AIDS and cancer are the best things that ever happened to that community." The words hung there, cruel, ignorant, and exposed. Talia didn't raise her voice, she didn't need to. "That," she said slowly, "is not morality, that is fear dressed up as righteousness." Her eyes hardened. "You don't hate them because of what they do, you hate them because they live honestly in ways you were too afraid to even consider." She shook her head, disgust plain now. "A disease isn't justice, death isn't a lesson, and suffering isn't proof of wrongdoing." She leaned in. "If that's what you tell yourself to sleep at night, then the problem was never Noah, it was never love, it was you." He opened his mouth, she cut him off. "And don't ever say that kind of poison around me again," she said finally. "Not about my son, not about anyone. If you need hatred to feel clean, then you're already lost. Cancer, AIDS, and guns have done wonders for the gays and pervs I know." Tate smirked. She stood, gathering her things. "Noah didn't walk away because he was weak, he walked away because he was done carrying your fear." Talia's voice cut through him, sharp and unyielding. "Noah is straight," she said, "but what if he weren't? What if he got AIDS anyway?" She leaned forward, eyes blazing. "Would you wish him to shrivel away to nothing because he took drugs or wasn't careful?" Tate didn't answer. He crumpled his napkin, throwing it on the table in disgust. She didn't wait. "That's what your words mean," she continued, disgust threading every syllable. "That sickness is deserved, that suffering is punishment, that some lives are worth less if they don't fit your narrow sense of safety." She shook her head slowly. That isn't values, Tate, that's cruelty and fear and ignorance. Her voice steadied, colder now. Noah's worth has nothing to do with who he sleeps with, what mistakes he might make, or what illness could ever touch him. If you can't see that, if you need people to suffer so you can feel justified, then you are far more broken than you've ever allowed yourself to admit. I used him, Tate smirked. Noah was pretty easy to use. I mean, he was so desperate, so needy, and my ego needed a stroke. I told everyone at school what I really thought of him, and he found out but believed whatever I told him in private. He really is a stupid cunt. He stayed too long cause I got used to having a devoted, clingy person around. I never saw him as an equal or as a person who had feelings that mattered to me. Talia was horror-struck at how unfeeling and emotionless Tate was toward his oldest companion. Talia stood, she was done. And for the record, she added, turning back once, if anyone ever wished my son dead for existing outside their comfort, I would burn that belief to the ground. Tate's restraint finally cracked. His lip curled, contempt spilling out of him in a way that was unmistakably personal, too practiced, too familiar to be abstract. This wasn't borrowed rhetoric, it was lived-in hatred. I don't care what you call it, he snapped. I've seen what they do, hell, 2 of them liked Noah in college. Noah draws pervs, he can't help it, I know what they're like. His hand tightened into a fist on the table. Everything about it is wrong, filthy, predatory, it destroys people. Talia stared at him, stunned not by the volume but by the certainty, by how easily the words came. This isn't fear, she said quietly, this is an obsession. He scoffed, I don't obsess, I educate myself. No, she corrected, voice firm, you fixate, you reduce human beings to caricatures so you don't have to look at your own choices. Her eyes hardened. Hatred like this doesn't come from nowhere, Tate, it comes from something you refuse to face. He shook his head sharply, don't psychoanalyze me. I don't have to, she replied, you're doing it out loud. She leaned back, disappointment settling into something heavier. What you're showing me right now isn't conviction, it's disgust masquerading as certainty, and it's exactly why Noah is gone. Tate fell silent, breathing hard, jaw still clenched, but the venom had already done its work. It sat there between them, exposed. That hatred, Talia said at last, softer but unyielding, is yours, not his, not theirs, and until you own it you'll keep burning the best things you touch. I would love Noah even if he slept with men or women, if he were safe and happy, who would care? Talia said, her voice steady, unflinching. I certainly wouldn't. She leaned forward, eyes locked on him. You made him happy, you did. That complex, passionate relationship you both had was rare, deep, and sustaining. You threw it away for convenience, for a body, for pussy. The word landed without apology. You didn't lose him because of morality, she went on. You lost him because you chose the easier thing over the truer one, because you were afraid of what staying might cost you. She shook her head, grief threaded with anger now. He offered you loyalty, time, a life woven together in quiet daily ways, and you traded that for something that asked nothing of you but desire. Tate said nothing. That wasn't love, Talia finished. That was fear making your choices for you, and Noah paid the price. Where did you learn to hate gay people, son? Talia asked quietly. In my everyday life, Tate hissed. His jaw was tight, eyes hard. I've seen enough to last a lifetime. I met a few in college, and Noah had a talent for attracting pervs in his everyday life. Mark was one, and he never left Noah alone. Noah wouldn't listen to Mark, but that's his flaw. Talia recoiled not in fear but in revulsion. Stop, she said, sharp as a blade. Listen to yourself. She leaned in. You didn't save Noah, you decided on a story and cast yourself as the hero. His mouth opened, she didn't let him speak. Hatred doesn't come from evidence, she continued. It comes from fear looking for permission. Her voice dropped, controlled. You take isolated moments, twist them into monsters, and then congratulate yourself for surviving something you invented. That's not true, he snapped. It is, she replied evenly. Because if you actually cared about protecting Noah, you wouldn't be using him as a shield for your disgust. You wouldn't be reducing whole human beings to something dirty so you can feel clean. She shook her head, sadness overtaking anger. Whatever you think you witnessed, whatever you think you learned, it didn't teach you wisdom, it taught you contempt. And contempt is easy, it asks nothing of you. She sat back, eyes steady. Noah didn't need saving from people, he needed honesty from you, and you gave him fear instead. Silence settled thick and final. That, Talia said softly, is where this truly broke. Stop asking, he said finally, the words clipped bitter, and then he walked away. Tate carried the box Noah had returned to him held close to his chest, not casually, not carelessly, carefully, like it contained something fragile, irreplaceable, like it mattered more than he was willing to admit out loud. Talia watched him go, her heart sinking at the sight. She noticed the way his fingers curved protectively around the edges, the way he kept it level, steady, as though any jolt might damage what was inside. It told her everything he hadn't. Tate could sabotage his parents' desires to adopt Noah by giving a wedding announcement at the same time as Talia's meeting with Noah. But how he held Noah's belongings told a different story. Hatred could be inherited, fear could be taught. But whatever Noah had been to him, whatever he had lost, was not something he could simply discard. And that, she realized, was the cruelest part of all. Talia didn't let it rest. Soon after Serena died in October of 1995, Talia called her relatives one by one, sisters, cousins, aunts, anyone who had been close enough to leave an imprint. She asked the same question every time, her voice tight with urgency. Did you ever hear anyone tell Tate that gay people were bad, that they were predators? Did you ever say it? Did you ever hear someone else say it around him? The answers came back uneven but consistent. Confusion, surprise, unease. No, one said. Absolutely not, said another. I would have shut that down immediately. I've never heard anyone talk like that in our family. Some were offended by the suggestion, others sounded shaken. A few went quiet, thinking hard, replaying old memories, and still came up empty. No one knew the answer. No one admitted to it. No one had ever seen anyone speak to Tate that way. When she ended the last call, Talia sat alone at her kitchen table, phone still in her hand, staring at nothing. The absence of an answer was its own kind of answer. If no one had taught him openly, then whatever had taken root in Tate had grown quietly, absorbed, inferred, internalized. A fear learned sideways, a hatred assembled from fragments not handed down whole. She thought of the way he'd held Noah's box. Careful, reverent, almost tender. And the contradiction landed heavily in her chest. Whatever Tate had been taught about love, it hadn't been clean. Whatever he had learned about fear, it had stayed. And whatever he had lost with Noah, no one else in the family had put it there. That, she realized, made it harder to name. And far harder to undo. Talia made the second worst mistake of her life. She assumed someone somewhere must have said something to Tate. She needed a speaker, a moment, a villain she could name and confront, something concrete she could push back against. But the answer she was desperate for wasn't hidden in a conversation or a person. It wasn't a phrase overheard or a lesson taught outright. It was so obvious that it escaped notice by Noah, by Talia, by everyone. What shaped Tate hadn't come from being told. It came from watching. Tate learned that love should be useful. That attachment should be deniable. That if something mattered too much, it had the power to ruin you. And Noah, steady, loyal, unembarrassed by closeness, became the quiet threat to that worldview. It would take years before anyone understood that the hatred wasn't inherited or instructed. It was constructed, brick by brick, from fear, silence, and the absence of permission to want freely. By the time that truth surfaced, Noah would be long gone from Tate's life. And the tragedy wasn't just that Tate lost him. It was that the answer had been there all along, in plain sight, waiting for someone to realize that the most dangerous lessons are the ones no one remembers being taught. Talia stared at the phone for a long moment before pressing the number, one she had hoped sincerely to never dial again. It rang longer than she expected. "Hello," an older woman answered, cautious, guarded. "Mrs. Vaughn," Talia said, her voice steady despite the tightness in her chest. "This is Talia Blue. We knew each other in New York, years ago. Our sons were friends in the 70s. There was a pause, a breath is drawn in slowly. "Talia," Victoria Vaughn said at last. Recognition sharpened her tone. "Yes, I remember." "I wouldn't be calling if it weren't important," Talia continued. "I'm trying to understand something about my son, about what he learned, what he absorbed back then." Silence stretched on the line, heavy, deliberate. I wondered when this call would come, Victoria said finally, not surprised, not confused, almost resigned. Talia closed her eyes. Our boys spent time together, Talia said carefully. A lot of time, and I need to know, did you ever hear anyone talk around them about gay people, about fear, about disgust? Victoria let out a short, humorless breath. Why didn't Wayne return to our home after Tate's 4th birthday? Talia asked quietly. Tate hasn't said a word about it, not then, not since. Victoria sighed on the other end of the line, a long, tired sound. Wayne told us nothing, she said. He came home sick, stomach flu, and very upset, we thought. He said he didn't want to see Tate again. That was all he'd give us. We quickly took Wayne home back then because the boy was turning green and I thought our son would make a mess at your house. Wayne's leaving Tate's house reminded her a lot of Serena when she had run out of the blue mansion. Talia closed her eyes, nothing else. No, Victoria said, then, after a beat, wait, Wayne's just walked in the door, you can ask him. There was a brief muffled exchange, the scrape of a chair. The line clicked softly as it changed hands. Hello, Wayne said, older now, careful. Wayne, Talia said, steadying herself. It's Talia Blue, Tate's mom. I need to understand something. On Tate's 4th birthday you disappeared. Why? Silence long enough to be deliberate. What do you want to know? Wayne asked quietly. Talia didn't soften it, she didn't circle. Did you teach my son to hate gay people? She asked. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. No, Wayne said immediately. God, no. His voice cracked not with guilt but with something closer to alarm. I was 4, I didn't even have words for any of that. She waited. I didn't hate anyone, he went on. I didn't understand anything. I knew I liked Tate, I knew we held hands, I knew we laughed, and then one day everything changed. Your son is responsible for everything that happened, he's dangerous. I heard Tate hit you, Wayne, Talia said quietly. I'm sorry. Don't be, Wayne replied, his voice was calm, too calm. I asked for it. Talia stiffened, no one asks to be hit. Wayne exhaled. I know how that sounds, he said. What I mean is, I crossed a line, I tried to hit on Noah, I didn't understand what I was touching. He hesitated. It poked a wound Tate never let heal. That still doesn't make violence acceptable, Talia said firmly. I'm not excusing it, Wayne answered. I'm explaining it. Tate wasn't angry about Noah, he was terrified of what Noah meant and that I understood everything, and I put words to something he'd spent his whole life trying to bury. Talia's grip tightened on the phone, so he lashed out. Yes, Wayne said simply, that's how he survives, by turning fear into force. Silence followed. I didn't see it then, Wayne added. I thought it was about me. It wasn't. It was about him losing control of the story he tells himself and everyone else. Talia closed her eyes. Thank you for telling me, she said at last, and for being honest even when it costs you. One more thing, Wayne said, his voice flattening, losing all warmth. I know why you called, what you want, but I can't tell you. I can't give you your ace in the hole, and I can't disclose anything I may or may not know. If I do that, I won't own Tate anymore, and I kind of like owning him. I don't like Tate now, I did then when we were kids. Silence. Wayne let out a humorless chuckle. I had no idea that when I met your son and came over that night it would pay off so well for me. Sometimes when you're in the right place at the right time you hit the jackpot. It's unbelievable the kinds of things Tate has done. Even in my wildest imagination, after any cocktail or drunken bender, I could never have dreamed up what I've seen. Your son is one of a kind, and I don't mean that as a compliment. Wayne's words hung in the air. Talia's stomach tightened. Every instinct told her she wasn't going to like what came next, and for the first time since he'd started talking, she found herself wishing he would simply stop. Wayne leaned back in his chair, an amused smile slowly spreading across his face as though he'd been waiting years to tell someone this. Tate has a type, he said, shaking his head with a quiet laugh. The funny part is that Noah thinks it's blonde men with blue eyes, that's what he tells himself. That's the story he's clung to all these years because it's easier than facing the truth. Talia's brow furrowed. What are you talking about? Wayne ignored the question. Noah couldn't be further from Tate's type. Hair color doesn't matter. Eye color doesn't matter. If Noah had red hair, purple hair, green hair, it wouldn't have changed a thing. He was chasing the wrong answer from the very beginning. Talia crossed her arms tightly over her chest. You're not making any sense. Oh, I am, Wayne smiled, you just don't want to hear it. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. Tate has only ever loved himself. The words landed like a slap. Talia's expression hardened immediately. Stop. He has, Wayne continued without missing a beat. He's only ever loved what he sees in the mirror, that's his type, that's his obsession. Talia felt her pulse quicken. You're talking about my son. I know exactly who I'm talking about. Wayne's smile widened. Tate's favorite person has always been Tate. His favorite relationship has always been the one he has with himself. Everyone else, he shrugged, they're supporting characters. That's enough. No, Wayne said calmly, you wanted to know who your son really is. He folded his hands together. Tate's appetites and behavior are unlike anything I've ever seen. If it weren't so disturbing, I'd almost admire the sheer narcissism of it. It's fascinating in a clinical sort of way. Talia stared at him, unable to tell whether he was exaggerating or being completely serious. I don't believe you. You don't have to. Wayne gave another dry laugh. It's rare for love stories to have happy endings. Most people spend their lives looking for someone else. In Tate's case, though, his lips curled into a lewd smirk. It had the happiest ending imaginable. The implication made Talia's stomach churn. She looked away for a moment, wishing she'd never agreed to this conversation. Poor Noah, Wayne continued, he never stood a chance. Talia looked back at him. What does Noah have to do with any of this? Everything. Wayne sighed. He showed up too late, that's all. Sometimes people walk into a story after it's already begun and by then there's nothing left to win. Noah thought he was competing against other people, other men. He wasn't. Wayne slowly shook his head. Noah is one of the blindest men I've ever met. If he could have read a room, really read one, he would have realized years ago that he was fighting a battle he could never win. Talia's voice was barely above a whisper. I don't understand. Of course you don't. Wayne's eyes never left hers. When Tate says he's the most fucked up boy in California, he's not exaggerating. Most people think that's self-hatred talking. He paused. It isn't. Tate has only ever loved himself. He's only ever devoted everything he has to himself. Every sacrifice, every obsession, every ounce of loyalty eventually circles back to the same person. Wayne slowly shook his head. I've met selfish people, I've met vain people, I've met narcissists, but I've never seen someone so completely consumed by themselves. It's disturbing. Silence settled over the room. Talia couldn't find the words to answer him. Part of her wanted to stand up and walk out. Another part desperately wanted Wayne to be lying. Because if even a fraction of what he'd said was true, then she had spent her son's entire life believing she understood him, when perhaps she had never truly known him at all. Wayne let out a quiet laugh and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Poor Noah. Talia looked up sharply. What about Noah? Wayne smiled with something that almost resembled pity. He wanted it to be a love story. He let the sentence linger. He probably imagined Tate would wake up one day, realize he'd loved Noah all along, show up on his front porch and beg for another chance. That's how those stories usually go, isn't it? Grand declarations, second chances, the person you've always wanted is finally choosing you. Wayne slowly shook his head. But Noah isn't in the love story. Talia frowned. What are you talking about? He's standing outside of it, looking in while Tate made everyone believe Noah was the center of the non-existent love story between Tate and Noah. Wayne's voice remained calm, almost conversational. The tragedy is that Noah thinks he's the main character, the main lover in a love story when he isn't even a lover or a star-crossed sweetheart. The love story was never about Noah. His smile returned. And honestly, I hope he never figures that out. Talia stared at him. You're cruel. No. Wayne shrugged. I'm realistic. He folded his hands together. Poor Noah spent all those years wondering why Tate would never tell him how he felt. He searched for hidden meanings, mixed signals, timing, fear of rejection. He convinced himself there had to be some explanation. Wayne chuckled quietly. The truth is much simpler. He looked directly at Talia. If Tate ever actually told Noah the truth, Noah would probably be dead. He wouldn't be the first one to die when they figure out the structure Tate uses to hide. Talia swallowed hard. I don't believe you. That's because you're still looking at it from Noah's perspective. Wayne leaned forward. It's a mirror image. He tapped a finger against the table. It's so painfully obvious once you know what you're looking at. Talia's heart pounded. I don't know what you're trying to say. No, Wayne agreed softly, because Noah was never supposed to know either. He smiled again, this time with unmistakable satisfaction. Some truths are better left undiscovered. The room felt smaller. The last thing we need, Wayne continued, is another person running out of Tate's house screaming after they finally understand who he really is. Talia's breathing slowed as she searched Wayne's face for any sign that he was joking. She found none. Instead, she saw a man who seemed utterly convinced that he had uncovered something no one else had. For the first time since the conversation began, Talia wasn't just uncomfortable. She was afraid of where Wayne was taking it. Wayne studied Talia for a long moment before a knowing smile spread across his face. Let me guess, he said quietly. Serena got scared. Talia didn't answer. Not because she realized how hopeless Tate was in relationships, Wayne continued. No, that wasn't what frightened her. He leaned back. She recognized the handwriting in the letter Chloe read aloud to her friends. A chill crept down Talia's spine. The moment she recognized it, everything changed. She realized that whatever she'd spent her life preparing herself for, this wasn't it. Wayne gave a slow shake of his head. There isn't a class for this. There isn't a therapist, professor, detective, or psychologist who trains you for something like this. Whatever Serena expected to find, she had absolutely no preparation for what was actually waiting on those pages. Talia's voice came out barely above a whisper. How could you possibly know that? Wayne ignored the question. If you're a wise woman, you won't ask any more questions. His expression lost all amusement. You'll walk away from this conversation, go home, and live the rest of your life blissfully ignorant. He looked directly into her eyes. Because ignorance is a gift. Talia felt her heartbeat quicken. And you, she asked. Wayne smiled, though there was no warmth behind it. I'm not afraid anymore. He paused. But they always throw up. Talia frowned. What? Everyone. He spoke with unsettling certainty. Every single person who truly understands throws up. The room fell silent. Wayne continued in the same calm tone. It doesn't matter how intelligent they are. It doesn't matter how many degrees hang on their wall, how much education they've received, or how vivid their imagination is. He slowly shook his head. There isn't a human being alive who could sit down, think through every possibility, and arrive at the truth. It simply doesn't occur to people that something like this could exist. His eyes never left Talia's. Because the reality is so far beyond ordinary experience that the mind rejects it before it can even comprehend it. Talia swallowed hard. For the first time since Wayne had started talking, she wasn't sure she wanted to hear another word. Wayne let out a low, almost amused laugh. Nowhere is the distraction, he said, not the main event. Talia frowned. What are you talking about? He's the red herring. Wayne spoke with complete certainty. Everyone focuses on Noah because he's the obvious choice. They think he's the love story. They think he's the hero who gets the guy in the end. Wayne slowly shook his head. He isn't. The words settled heavily between them. Wayne laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. It was the kind of laugh reserved for people who had spent years watching everyone else miss the obvious. You and every idiot in Lowe's Angels are operating under the same misunderstanding, or, as I've come to call it, the same delusion that Tate and Noah meeting was some happy accident. His eyes drifted toward Talia. People tell the story like two little boys happened to bump into each other on a playground and became inseparable. That's comforting. It lets everyone believe fate just smiled on them. He shook his head. That's not what happened. The room grew still. Tate was bringing home a little boy that day. They had already decided when he lived in NYC before moving to LA that he wasn't leaving that playground alone. That part was never in question. Wayne paused, letting the words sink in. The only thing that wasn't preordained was that the little boy happened to be Noah. Talia blinked several times, trying to process what she'd just heard. Her mind instinctively replayed that afternoon from years ago. She had always remembered it as one of those ordinary parenting moments that somehow became extraordinary. Tate had come home excited, dragging along a tiny blonde boy with an infectious smile, and she'd simply opened the door, smiled, and welcomed Noah inside. Now Wayne was telling her that the story she'd carried for decades wasn't the story at all. Her brow tightened. "You're saying," she began quietly, unable to finish the sentence. Wayne simply held her gaze. A knot formed in Talia's stomach. She remembered how determined Tate had been as a child. Once he decided something, there was almost no changing his mind. At the time, she'd thought it was stubbornness mixed with a sweet, generous heart. Now she wondered whether she'd witnessed something far stranger and simply lacked the language to describe it. Her fingers curled together in her lap. "So, if it hadn't been Noah," she whispered. Wayne nodded once. "It would have been someone else." Talia looked down at the floor, her heart unexpectedly aching for both boys. For Noah, who had spent his life believing he'd simply made a best friend. And for Tate, who, even as a preschooler, had apparently walked onto that playground with a purpose no one else could see. When she finally looked back up, there was uncertainty in her eyes. "I don't know whether that's the sweetest thing I've ever heard," she admitted softly, "or the most unsettling." Wayne gave a small shrug. "That's because it's both. Noah being in Tate's life wasn't an accident. Tate meeting Noah wasn't accidental." Talia's expression hardened. "You keep talking like everything was planned." Wayne smiled. "It wasn't Tate who planned it. Everything has a purpose when you understand how the machine works." He folded his hands together. "Poor Noah actually believes it was nothing more than dumb luck that he met Tate in preschool." Wayne laughed to himself. "That boy is so unnecessarily naive." Talia's stomach tightened. "You sound like you're saying someone arranged it." Wayne looked at her for a long moment before answering. "I'm saying Noah tells himself a comforting story. Two little boys happened to meet on a playground, became best friends, and the rest was history." He gave another quiet laugh. "It makes for a nice story." His smile faded. "It just isn't the whole story." Talia searched his face. "What are you saying?" Wayne leaned forward. "It wasn't even Tate's idea." The room went still. Talia blinked. "What wasn't?" Wayne only smiled. "That's the question, isn't it?" He settled back into his chair, leaving the implication hanging in the silence. Wayne sighed as if he couldn't believe he had to explain himself twice. "I'll say it again." He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Talia. "Tate meeting Noah wasn't a chance encounter, it wasn't dumb luck." Talia's jaw tightened. "You keep saying that." "Because it's true," Wayne replied. "At least it's the only version that makes any sense." He gave a dismissive wave of his hand. "Tate didn't want to bring anyone home." The room fell quiet. It wasn't even Tate's idea to approach Noah and befriend the blonde. Talia stared at him. "What are you implying?" Wayne smiled faintly. "I'm saying Tate learned something very early in life." He paused. He learned how easily people mistake innocence for opportunity. Wayne rested his elbows on the table. "Look around any playground, every group has one child who's eager to please, one who's trusting, one who follows instead of questions." His smile widened. In Noah, Tate found exactly that. Talia's face hardened. "You're talking about them like they were 4-year-olds running some elaborate scheme." "I'm talking about what I believe happened," Wayne said evenly. "Tate did as he was told and chose Noah, who was the sweetest, most trusting boy on that playground. He'd believe what he was told. He'd go where he was asked to go. Noah would obey and not cause trouble." Wayne chuckled. "And Tate knew it." Talia shook her head. "No. Believe whatever helps you sleep at night." Wayne laughed as if what he said was an inside joke. "But if you honestly think Tate brought Noah home because he was lonely, because he wanted a best friend, because he just happened to like the blonde kid from preschool." He let out a humorless laugh. "Then, Mrs. Blue, you're asking the wrong questions. Noah was the substitute. Everyone thinks he was the second me. No, it wasn't about me." Silence settled over the room as Talia struggled to reconcile Wayne's words with the son she thought she knew. Wayne let out a quiet sigh. Poor Noah. Talia looked at him, her patience nearly exhausted. What now? Wayne folded his hands together. He spent decades waiting for Tate to finally open his mouth and tell the blonde boy how he really feels. He smiled sadly. That's the dream, isn't it? The confession, the moment everything finally makes sense. He slowly shook his head. The problem with that fantasy is that Tate couldn't tell Noah how he feels without explaining everything that came before and all the shit that happened later. Talia's expression tightened. What do you mean? Wayne looked at her as though the answer were obvious. He'd have to explain why he brought Noah home in the first place. His voice became quieter. He'd have to admit it wasn't even his idea. Talia stared at him. And then... Wayne gave a humorless laugh. Then comes the impossible part. He leaned back in his chair. He'd have to tell Noah the story as he believes it really happened. He'd have to admit that from the very beginning he used Noah. That he let Noah believe one version of their relationship while carrying another version around in his own head. Talia's eyes narrowed. You're asking me to believe my son deceived his buddy for decades. I'm telling you why I don't think Tate ever says a word. Wayne shrugged. I can't honestly blame him. For the first time, there was something almost sympathetic in his voice. I wouldn't want to have that conversation either. He looked down for a moment before meeting Talia's eyes again. Imagine sitting across from the person who's trusted you most and saying, everything you've believed about how this began isn't how I remember it. The room fell silent. Wayne exhaled through his nose. Whatever the truth is, that's not a conversation anyone walks away from unchanged. He paused. And as for blame, Wayne gave a small cynical smile. I don't think any jury would convict Tate of using Noah. Talia frowned. What is that supposed to mean? It means people rarely judge someone by where a story begins, and I know why he did. Wayne's smile faded. They judge them by what they chose to do afterward. Talia held his gaze, unsure whether she was listening to a man revealing the truth, or one determined to make everyone else see the world through his eyes. Wayne laughed, the sound sharp and humorless. The whole situation is unbelievable. He shook his head in disbelief. If someone told me this story before I lived it myself, I'd have looked them straight in the eye and asked, what the fuck is wrong with rich people? The smile lingered for only a moment before fading. And yet, here we are. Talia said nothing. Wayne's expression grew unexpectedly serious. Poor Tate. The words caught her off guard. People think he's fearless, they think he doesn't care what anyone thinks. Wayne slowly shook his head. They couldn't be more wrong. He looked down at the table. That boy carries an unbearable amount of shame. Talia's chest tightened. And Noah. Wayne sighed. Noah doesn't understand any of what's happening, he never has. He gave a faint, almost pitying smile. He's been trying to solve a puzzle without ever realizing half the pieces are missing. Silence settled between them. Wayne finally looked back up. But... He paused just long enough for the word to hang in the air. There is one more thing I want to tell you. Talia felt her stomach knot. For reasons she couldn't explain, part of her wanted to stop him before he said another word. Instead, she remained silent, waiting for whatever came next. You're a good woman, Mrs. Blue, but how in God's name don't you know? How did you not know for 27 years while Tate grew up in Los Angeles? Everyone I met around Tate knew, but somehow you never did. You're his own mother, you're responsible for all this, and you don't have a clue. The irony of all this is magnificent. Wayne laughed. The things I know were pure coincidence because I was there. And that's when I realized, you really don't know your son. No one knows your son. I've never seen a better actor than Tate. He's good at magic tricks. He had an amazing invisible teacher. He's extraordinarily talented at bullshitting everyone. A pause, measured. Tate isn't confused, Mrs. Blue. He's curated. Tate isn't crazy or paranoid. Your son is not obsessed or possessive. Instead, he's coping with transference. Talia flinched. He didn't rush the next words. He has patterns, preferences, he repeats himself. Another pause. People like that always do. The silence stretched until it felt intentional. The irony of him preaching disgust about gay people, Wayne said quietly. That's not honesty, that's camouflage and hypocrisy. a faint breath of amusement. If you understood what I've seen, you wouldn't ask questions, you'd never poke further, you live with it, you profit from it, or you load your gun and point it at your throat. Your entire life and happiness rest on never digging up the truth. Talia felt the blood drain from her face. Keep Noah away from him, Wayne continued, calm as a diagnosis. Distance is the only thing that ever works. Tate can't help himself, he will destroy anyone he touches. He'll just adapt. Hell, Tate has been watching Noah for years. Your son copies Noah's emotions to fool everyone. He feels nothing and you bitch are to blame. Your son is the coldest, cruelest, meanest, most emotionless person I've ever unfortunately had the opportunity to sleep next to. She swallowed. What are you saying? Wayne exhaled through his nose. The bond your son has with Noah is disgusting, and I know why it happened and why it's still going on. The reasons for their bond and why no one could understand it are that it's the result of the most unnatural act any human being could commit. I'm not dumb and I'm not blind like you. I'm saying I know things I'm not going to explain. A beat. It's more profitable that way. Your son is a cold psychopath, a pervert, a criminal, a felon, a predator, an unnatural freak, and I'm feeling he has a knack for protecting himself at the expense of everyone else. He'll never tell you the truth because the truth scares Tate more than ruining his own mental health. The sad part about all this is that it's not his fault. Tate sighed, then continued. Tate has so much internalized shame, self-hatred, and disgust for himself that he can't be honest because he cares about what that dumb blonde cunt thinks. Keep Tate as far away from Noah as possible, Wayne said. Influence, presence, money, or access, cut all of it off. Tate doesn't need any reason to ruin someone and his actions ruin them. Being near Tate is enough. Keep Tate away from children because if he hasn't prayed, he will. It's only a matter of time before Tate starts another abusive cycle. Noah is the smoking gun, so do yourself a favor and stop looking at Noah like everyone else does, and for once look at someone or somewhere else. You really are a dumb bitch. How do you not know? You're the responsible party in all of this and you haven't a clue, Wayne laughed. Another pause, deliberate. Talia flinched. Tate's too good at convincing people he's harmless. Your son is a monster, he's disgusting, he shouldn't even exist if the universe were fair. Noah's just the dumb cunt that fell for a disturbed, disgusting sicko, Wayne exhaled through his nose. I'm saying I know things I'm not going to explain. Then colder still, don't call my mother or me again. A final pause, deliberate, cruel. Cunt. The line went dead. After speaking to Wayne and enduring his abrupt hang-up, Talia remained frozen in her chair, her phone still in her hand. She was horrified, not because she understood what Wayne had said, but because she didn't. His words refused to leave her mind. For decades, she had believed Tate and Noah met by pure chance, two little boys who instantly became inseparable. It was a story she had always cherished. Now Wayne had completely unraveled it. He insisted Tate had already planned to bring home a little boy that day. The only coincidence, according to Wayne, was that the child happened to be Noah. Talia's stomach turned. If Wayne was telling the truth, then only one question mattered. Who the hell told Tate to do it? He had only been 4 years old. 4-year-olds didn't decide to walk onto a playground intending to bring home another child. Someone had to have put that thought into his head, hadn't they? The possibility was almost too unsettling to consider. She searched her memories for anything unusual about that afternoon, but nothing stood out. It had always seemed like an ordinary day that became the beginning of an extraordinary friendship. Now she wondered if she had overlooked something important all those years ago. Wayne's certainty haunted her. As impossible as his story sounded, he had spoken as though he knew something she didn't. For the first time, Talia questioned whether she had ever truly understood how the extraordinary bond between Tate and Noah had begun.